My father-in-law ripped up my disability check in front of everyone. Real men work, not live off handouts. My wife said nothing as he threw the pieces at me. What he didn't realize was that the postman who delivered it was still at the door. He cleared his throat and said, "Sir, that's a federal crime." My father-in-law tore the check in half, then in half again, then again. White confetti of federal currency fluttering onto the mahogany dining table, landing in my wife's chocolate mousse, scattering across the lace tablecloth her mother had spent an hour ironing that morning. $1,800, my disability check. The only income keeping me and Lisa afloat while I couldn't work. Gone. "This is what I think of handouts," Robert said, his voice carrying across the silent dining room. 12 pairs of eyes watched him throw the scraps at me. They hit my chest, tumbled into my lap, and fell to the hardwood floor. "Maybe now you'll get off your ass and find real work." I sat there frozen. Pieces of Social Security Administration check number 847392614 scattered around me like evidence at a crime scene. That's when Carl spoke. "Sir?" Everyone turned. The mailman was still standing in the doorway to the dining room, still holding his leather satchel, still in his blue USPS uniform with 23 years of service pins on the collar. I had forgotten he was there. That's a federal crime. I had been married to Lisa for 4 years. 4 good years, mostly. We'd met at a community college fundraiser where she was volunteering and I was donating materials from the construction company I worked for. She was beautiful. Dark hair, warm smile, the kind of person who made you feel like the most important person in the room. We dated for 8 months before I proposed. Got married at her parents' church in Tacoma. Small ceremony, 50 people. Robert had given a toast about how he was trusting me with his daughter and how I'd better not let her down. I promised I wouldn't. The first 3 years were great. I was making decent money as a construction foreman, $58,000 a year plus overtime. We'd saved up for a down payment on a house. We were talking about kids. Had plans. Then came November 17th, 2021, the day that changed everything. We were working on a commercial build in downtown Seattle, a 7-story office complex. I was on the 3rd floor coordinating a steel beam installation with the crane operator. The rigging failed. A 2-ton I-beam, 20 feet long, swung loose from the crane cable at 2:47 p.m. It hit me square in the lower back, driving me into the concrete floor. I remember the sound like a tree branch snapping, but the branch was my spine. 2 shattered vertebrae, L4 and L5 herniated discs, nerve damage. The orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Patricia Ye, told me I was lucky to walk. She said that if the beam had hit 6 inches higher, I'd be paralyzed from the waist down. "But you'll never do physical labor again," she'd said. "Your back can't take it. 20 pounds is your max lifting capacity. Anything more risks permanent paralysis." I'd been out of work for 3 years. Workers' comp had covered the surgeries, the physical therapy, the medications, but after 18 months, they determined I'd reached maximum medical improvement. Translation, this was as good as I was going to get. So I'd applied for Social Security disability insurance. The process took 14 months. Forms, medical records, 3 separate examinations by Social Security doctors, a hearing before an administrative law judge, Honorable Michael Torres, who'd reviewed my case and determined that yes, a man with 2 shattered vertebrae and permanent nerve damage qualified as disabled. The approval letter had arrived in March. Retroactive payments covered the time I'd been unable to work, then monthly checks of $1,843. Not enough to live on comfortably, but enough to keep the lights on and food on the table while I figured out what came next.
Lisa had been supportive at first. "We'll get through this," she'd said after my injury. "You're going to heal. We'll be okay." But as months turned into years, I'd seen the doubt creep in. The way she looked at me when I couldn't help move furniture. The silence when her friends talked about their husbands' promotions. The tension when I had to lie down in the middle of the day because the pain was too intense. And her family, especially Robert, had been worse. Robert Mitchell was a retired Boeing engineer, 67 years old, worked for 42 years before retiring with a full pension. Self-made man, he liked to remind everyone. Grew up poor in rural Washington, put himself through college, built a career on hard work and determination. He'd never hidden his disappointment in me. "When I was your age, I was providing for my family," he'd said at Thanksgiving last year, "not sitting around collecting government checks." "I'm not sitting around," I'd responded. "I'm recovering from a workplace injury." Excuses. My father broke his back in a mining accident and still worked until he was 70. Medicine has evolved since then. Doctors actually tell people not to cause permanent damage now. Robert had glared at me. Soft generation. Lisa had changed the subject.
Every family dinner since had followed the same pattern. Robert would make some comment about able-bodied men or welfare queens or government dependency. I'd bite my tongue. Lisa would stay silent. Her mother would serve dessert and pretend nothing was wrong. Today's Sunday dinner had started normally enough. Lisa's whole family, 12 people, crammed around the dining table at her parents' house in South Tacoma. Her 2 brothers, Jake and Tom, her sister Michelle, spouses, parents, grandmother. We'd made it through the pot roast, through the small talk about sports and weather, and Michelle's daughter's dance recital. Then the doorbell had rung during dessert. I'd stood up slowly, carefully, the way I always had to stand now, and walked to the front door. Carl Rodriguez, our regular mailman. Mid-50s, gray hair, the kind of guy who knew everyone on his route by name and remembered birthdays. "Special delivery, Ben. Needs a signature." I'd signed his electronic pad, taken the envelope, recognized the return address immediately. Social Security Administration, Disability Insurance Benefit Center, Baltimore, MD 21235. My monthly check. I'd walked back to the dining room, set the envelope on the table next to my plate while I sat down. That's when Robert had spotted it. "What's that?" His voice had that edge, the one I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant trouble. "Just mail." He'd picked it up before I could stop him, read the return address. Social Security Administration. The table had gone quiet. "Your disability check?" Not a question. An accusation, dripping with contempt. "Yes." And that's when he'd torn it open. Pulled out the check made out to Benjamin James Crawford for the amount of $1,800, dated October 1st, 2024. He'd held it up for everyone to see, every single month, for doing absolutely nothing. "Robert," Lisa had started. "No, Lisa, your husband needs to hear this." He looked at me with pure disgust. "Real men work. Real men provide for their families. They don't live off government handouts paid for by people like me who actually contributed to society." My jaw had clenched so hard I thought my teeth would crack. I worked construction for 15 years until a steel beam fell on my back and shattered 2 vertebrae. I didn't choose this. Excuses. Plenty of people have bad backs and still work. They push through the pain. They provide. I physically cannot lift more than 20 pounds without risking permanent paralysis.
"Because you're weak." He'd stood up, all 6'2" of him towering over the table. "My generation didn't quit when things got tough. We pushed through. We worked through injuries. We did what needed to be done. I am taking care of my family with my tax dollars." His face had gone red, veins visible in his neck. with money stolen from people who actually earn it. That's not taking care of your family, that's theft. Then he'd ripped the check in half. The sound, that sharp tear of paper, had cut through the dining room like a gunshot. This is what I think of handouts. He'd ripped it again and again and again, pieces fluttering everywhere. Then he'd thrown the scraps at me. They'd hit my chest, fallen into my lap, scattered across the floor. Everyone had stared. Jake, Tom, Michelle, Lisa's mother Dorothy, grandmother Helen, the spouses, the kids. Nobody said anything. Nobody moved. I'd looked at Lisa, my wife, the woman who'd promised to stand by me in sickness and in health, waiting for her to defend me, to say something, anything. She'd looked down at her plate. Robert had sat back down, satisfied. Maybe now you'll get off your ass and find real work like a real man. That's when Carl had spoken. Sir? Robert had turned, annoyed at the interruption. What? That's a federal crime? Robert had laughed. Actually laughed. What are you talking about? Carl had stepped fully into the dining room. I'd forgotten he was still there. He'd been asking me about my back, about how I was doing when Robert had grabbed the envelope. Destroying government mail, Carl said. His voice was calm, professional. Specifically, a federal benefit check issued by the Social Security Administration. That's a felony under 18 U.S. Code Section 1702, destruction of mail. The laughter had died on Robert's face. I'm a mailman, not a police officer, but I'm a federal employee, and I just witnessed you commit a federal crime. I'm required by law to report it. The room had gone absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Robert's face had started turning red again. Get out of my house. I'm already leaving, Carl said calmly, but I'll be filing an incident report the moment I get back to the post office, and I'll be documenting everything I witnessed. He'd pulled out his phone, started taking notes. Time, 1:47 p.m. Location, 3847 North Pine Street, Tacoma. Witness subject. He'd looked at Robert. Name. You don't need my name. I do, for the report. Carl had waited. Robert's face had gone from red to purple. Robert Mitchell.
Witnessed Robert Mitchell destroy U.S. Treasury check number 847392614, issued to Benjamin Crawford in the amount of $1,800 in front of 12 witnesses. Carl had looked around the table. I'll need names from all of you. You're witnesses to a federal crime. If this goes to court, you'll likely be subpoenaed to testify. Lisa's mother, Dorothy, had gone pale. Robert, what did you do? I didn't do anything. Robert's voice had risen to a shout. He's overreacting. It's just a check. It's federal property, Carl corrected. Destruction of government property, theft of federal benefits, depending on the prosecutor. This could also be charged as theft from a disabled person, which is an enhancement. He turned to me. Ben, I'm sorry this happened. You'll need to contact Social Security tomorrow to request a replacement check. They'll reissue it, but it might take 2 to 3 weeks. 2 to 3 weeks. Our rent was due in 5 days. I'd felt my stomach drop. Carl had handed me a business card. This has the SSA hotline, and if you want to file a police report, which I recommend, I'll be happy to provide my statement. I have 23 years with USPS. I know the law. What he did is a felony. Thank you, Carl. He nodded, looked at Robert one more time. You should probably get a lawyer, Mr. Mitchell. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service doesn't mess around with this kind of thing. Then he left. The dining room had stayed frozen for maybe 10 seconds after Carl walked out. Then everyone had started talking at once. Dad, what were you thinking? Is he serious? Can they actually prosecute? Robert, you tore up his disability check. We're all witnesses now. Robert had sunk back into his chair. His face had drained from purple to white. This is ridiculous. They're not going to actually prosecute over a check. They prosecuted a woman in Tennessee last year for the same thing, I'd said quietly. Everyone had turned to look at me. She destroyed her ex-husband's Social Security check, got 3 years in federal prison. I read about it when I was researching disability fraud cases. Lisa's brother Jake had already pulled out his phone, started Googling. Holy, he'd muttered. Dad, he's right. Federal offense, up to 5 years in prison, up to $250,000 in fines. The Postal Inspection Service has a 98% conviction rate. The color had completely drained from Robert's face. It was just, I was making a point. You humiliated me, I'd said. My voice was steady, calm, but I'd felt rage burning in my chest like a furnace. You called me weak in front of your entire family. You said I wasn't a real man. You destroyed the only income I have right now, and you did it because you think people with disabilities don't deserve help.
I didn't mean, yes, you did. You meant every word. I'd stood up slowly, carefully, the way I always had to move now. Started picking up the pieces of the torn check from the table, from my lap, from the floor. Put them in my pocket. I'll be filing a police report tomorrow, I'd said, and I'll be pressing charges. You can't, Robert had started. I can and I will, because what you did wasn't just illegal, it was cruel. And you did it to prove a point about people you don't understand and don't care to understand. Lisa had finally spoken. Ben, maybe we can just let this go? I'd turned to look at her. Really? Let it go? My voice had been quiet, dangerous. He destroyed our rent money, called me weak, threw torn paper at me like garbage, and you said nothing? He's my father, and I'm your husband, with a legitimate disability that he just mocked in front of everyone you know while committing a federal crime. She'd looked away, couldn't meet my eyes. You can stay here if you want. I'm going home. I'd walked out, gotten in our 2012 Honda Accord, and driven away. And as I sat at the red light on Pacific Avenue, 3 blocks from Robert's house, with torn pieces of my disability check in my pocket, and my wife's silence still ringing in my ears, I'd realized something. I was done. Done apologizing for being injured. Done accepting humiliation. Done letting my wife's family treat me like I was less than human because I couldn't work construction anymore. I pulled out my phone and called the Tacoma Police non-emergency line. Tacoma Police, how can I help you? I need to file a report. My father-in-law destroyed my Social Security disability check. A federal mail carrier witnessed it and said it was a felony. I'll send an officer to take your statement. What's your address? Officer Maria Santos arrived at our apartment at 4:23 p.m. Mid-30s, patrol officer, professional demeanor. She had taken my statement, photographed the torn check pieces, and took Carl's business card for his contact information. This is definitely a federal crime, she'd confirmed. Mail destruction, theft of government benefits. The Postal Inspection Service will handle the investigation, but I'll file this report and forward it to them. What happens next? They'll investigate, interview witnesses, interview the mail carrier. If they determine there's sufficient evidence, and from what you're telling me there is, they'll refer it to the U.S. Attorney's Office for prosecution. How long does that take? Federal cases move slowly. Could be months. But the Postal Inspection Service doesn't mess around.
They have a very high conviction rate.
After she left, I'd called Social Security, spent 43 minutes on hold, finally reached a representative named Denise who'd listened to my story and put in a request for a replacement check. "It'll take 2 to 3 weeks to process," she'd said. "I need it sooner. My rent is due." "I understand, Mr. Crawford, but that's the standard timeline. The system has to flag the original check as destroyed, void it, issue a new one, and mail it. There's no way to expedite it." "What am I supposed to do about rent?" "You could try calling your landlord, explain the situation, see if they'll work with you." I'd hung up. Called our landlord, Tom Peterson, explained what happened. "Jesus," he'd said. "Your father-in-law destroyed your disability check?" "Yes." "That's messed up. Look, don't worry about rent. Pay me when the replacement check comes. I'm not going to evict someone over this." "Thank you." "No problem. And Ben, file charges. Don't let him get away with that." Lisa came home at 7:18 p.m. I was sitting on the couch, back brace on, heating pad pressed against my lower spine. She'd stood in the doorway. "Ben, we need to talk." "Okay." "You can't actually press charges against my father." I stared at her. "Yes, I can. And I already filed a police report." "You what?" "I called the police, filed a report. Officer Santos took my statement and photos of the destroyed check. She's forwarding it to the Postal Inspection Service." Lisa's face had gone white. "Ben, no. You need to drop this." "Why?" "Because he's my father. Because this will destroy our family." "He destroyed federal property," I'd said calmly. "He committed a felony in front of 12 witnesses, including a federal mail carrier who's required by law to report it. He was just making a point by humiliating me, by destroying our income, by throwing torn paper at me like I was trash. He was frustrated, and you said nothing." I'd looked at her. "You sat there silent while your father called me weak and not a real man, while he destroyed the only money we have. You didn't defend me. You didn't say a word." She'd looked away. I didn't know what to say. How about, "Dad, stop"? How about, "That's wrong"? How about literally anything that showed you were on my side? "I am on your side." "No, you're on his side. You always have been." "Ben, please, just drop the charges. I'll talk to him. He'll apologize. We can move past this." "I'm not dropping anything. He committed a crime. He needs to face consequences." "You're being vindictive." "I'm being appropriate. Your father broke the law, humiliated me, and you're asking me to pretend it didn't happen to protect him. He's my father."
"And I'm your husband," my voice had risen. "I have a disability, a legitimate, documented, court-approved disability, and your father treats me like I'm lazy, like I'm scaling, like I'm less than human, and you let him." Lisa had started crying. "This is going to tear our family apart." "Your father did that, not me." She'd grabbed her purse. "I'm going back to my parents' house." "Of course you are." She'd left. I'd sat there on the couch alone and wondered when my wife had stopped being my partner and started being her father's daughter. The next morning I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Crawford, this is Inspector James Mitchell with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service." My heart had started racing. That was fast. "We take mail crime seriously. I've reviewed the police report filed by Officer Santos. I've also spoken with postal carrier Carl Rodriguez, who provided a detailed statement. I'd like to meet with you to get your statement on record." "Okay. Are you available this afternoon?" "I'm in Tacoma." "Yes." We'd met at a Starbucks on South Tacoma Way at 2:15 p.m. Inspector Mitchell was early 50s, gray suit, federal badge. He'd brought a laptop and a recording device. "I'm going to record this interview. Is that okay?" "Yes." He'd taken my statement, asked detailed questions,
showed me photos Carl had taken, photos I hadn't known existed, the torn check pieces on the table, Robert's face angry and red, the 12 witnesses watching. Carl documented everything, Inspector Mitchell had explained. Time-stamped photos, detailed notes, names of all witnesses. He's been a postal carrier for 23 years. He knows procedure. What happens now? I'll complete my investigation, interview the witnesses. Once I have everything documented, I'll refer the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office with a recommendation for prosecution. How long will that take? 2 to 3 months. Typically, federal cases move slowly. But, Mr. Crawford, I want you to understand something. What Robert Mitchell did is serious. It's not just about the money. It's about the integrity of the federal benefits system. If people can destroy disability checks without consequences, it undermines the entire program. I understand. Are you prepared for this to go to court, for your family to be involved? I'd thought about Lisa, about her tears last night, about her choosing her father over me. Yes, I'd said. I'm prepared. Inspector Mitchell moved fast. Within 2 weeks, he'd interviewed all 12 witnesses. Lisa's family had apparently not been happy about it. Dorothy had called me. Ben, please, Robert's terrified. He's 67 years old. He can't go to prison. He should have thought about that before he destroyed federal property. He made a mistake. He committed a crime in front of his entire family because he wanted to humiliate someone with a disability. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive? No, I'd said. I can't. I'd hung up. Lisa had moved back in with her parents, filed for separation. I'd hired a lawyer, Susan Chen, family law attorney with 18 years of experience. We'd started divorce proceedings. Your wife left you because you pressed charges against her father for committing a federal crime? Susan had asked during our first meeting. Yes. That tells you everything you need to know about whose side she was on. I know. 8 weeks after the Sunday dinner, I got a call from Assistant U.S. Attorney David Park. Mr. Crawford, we're moving forward with prosecution. Robert Mitchell will be charged with 1 count of mail destruction under 18 U.S. Code Section 1702. The charge carries a maximum of 5 years in federal prison and a $250,000 fine. What are the chances of conviction? Given the witness testimony, the federal employee's statement, the photographic evidence, and Mr. Mitchell's complete lack of defense, I'd say 99%. What will he actually get? That depends on several factors. No prior criminal record, his age, whether he shows remorse. Likely outcome is probation, community service, and a fine. But he'll have a federal felony conviction on his record. Good. The arraignment was scheduled for December 14, 2024. Federal Courthouse in Tacoma. I'd taken a lift because my back couldn't handle driving that far. The courthouse was intimidating. All marble and security checkpoints and federal seals. I'd spotted Robert and Dorothy in the hallway outside the courtroom. Robert looked like he'd aged 10 years. Gray, hollow, scared. Dorothy had seen me. Walked over.
Ben, please. He's willing to apologize, to make this right. Can't you drop the charges?
It doesn't work that way, I'd said. This is a federal prosecution. The U.S. Attorney is bringing the charges, not me. I couldn't drop them if I wanted to.
But you could ask them to.
No, I couldn't, and I wouldn't. Robert had been called before the magistrate judge, Honorable Patricia Morrison. She'd read the charges. Robert had pleaded not guilty. She'd set a trial date for March 2025. Mr. Mitchell, Judge Morrison had said, I'm releasing you on your own recognizance, but I want to be very clear. Destruction of federal mail is a serious offense. If you're found guilty, you will face significant consequences. I suggest you speak with your attorney about a plea agreement. After the arraignment, AUSA David Park had pulled me aside. His attorney is going to reach out about a plea deal. What are you comfortable with?
I want him to admit what he did on record, and I want him to face actual consequences. We can make that happen." 2 weeks later, Robert's attorney reached out to AUSA Park. They wanted a plea deal. Robert would plead guilty to 1 count of mail destruction. In exchange, the prosecution would recommend no prison time, 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service, a $5,000 fine, a formal apology letter to me, and mandatory attendance at a disability awareness course. I'd thought about it for 3 days, then I'd told AUSA Park I'd accept it. Good, because frankly, sending a 67-year-old first-time offender to federal prison for destroying a check seems excessive, but the conviction, the probation, the fine, that sends the right message.
The plea hearing was January 22nd, 2025. Same courthouse, same magistrate judge. Robert had stood before Judge Morrison and admitted on the record in open court that he destroyed my Social Security disability check, that he'd done it intentionally, that he'd known it was wrong. Judge Morrison had accepted the plea. "Mr. Mitchell," she'd said, "you violated federal law. You destroyed government property, and you did it to humiliate someone with a legitimate disability. That reflects poorly on your character and your judgment." Robert had stared at the floor. "You're fortunate that Mr. Crawford and the U.S. Attorney agreed to this plea deal. You're fortunate you're not going to prison. But you need to understand something. You now have a federal felony conviction that will follow you for the rest of your life. You'll never be able to own a firearm. You'll have to disclose it on job applications, loan applications, security clearances. This was not worth it. I understand, Your Honor." "Good. Make sure you do. You're sentenced to 3 years probation, 200 hours community service, and a $5,000 fine. You're also required to write a formal apology letter to Mr. Crawford and complete a disability awareness course approved by the probation office." The gavel had fallen. Robert Mitchell, retired Boeing engineer, 67 years old, self-made man, now had a federal felony conviction for destroying my disability check at Sunday dinner. 6 months later, my divorce from Lisa was finalized. She'd fought for spousal support. My attorney had laughed and pointed out that I was the one on disability with no income beyond my monthly check. Lisa had gotten nothing. My replacement Social Security check had arrived 3 weeks after the Sunday dinner. Our landlord, Tom, had been patient. I'd paid rent late, caught up on everything. I'd started taking online courses, web development, something I could do from home, something that didn't require lifting or standing for hours. The back pain never went away. I still wore a brace most days, still needed heating pads and careful movement. But I was building a new life. Robert's apology letter had arrived in February. "Dear Ben, I'm writing to apologize for destroying your Social Security disability check on October 1st, 2024. What I did was wrong. It was illegal. It was cruel. I let my personal beliefs about work and disability blind me to the reality of your situation. You have a legitimate injury. You have a legitimate disability. You deserve the benefits you receive. I humiliated you in front of my family. I destroyed money you needed to survive. I called you weak when you've shown nothing but strength in dealing with an injury that would have destroyed most men. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know I can't undo what I did. But I wanted you to know that I understand now how wrong I was. I hope someday you can forgive me. Sincerely, Robert Mitchell." I'd read it 3 times, filed it away, never responded.